Raquel's going to spotlight you, and we're going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. All right, guys, thank you very much for showing up and giving me an hour of your time. So the question is, one, guys, come on, turn on your cameras. You know what it's like when you're speaking to a bunch of just black with a name on it? It's not really that fun. But I want to make sure we understand what we're here for today. This is going to be different from what Mr. Abrams does or any of the other stuff you've done. I am not here to deliver a monologue. In fact, if you're looking for this professional speaker who has everything nailed and ready to go, I'm not the guy. I sell real estate. I have a real estate team. I'm in the market every day. I'm worried about rates. I'm trying to get sellers to sell. I'm trying to get my buyer offers accepted. I'm in the same boat as you guys. So whatever your expectations are of my speaking level, I want you to lower it drastically. Is that fair? Okay. And then I want you to create a dialogue here, not a monologue, which means that in a second, I'm going to ask, what are some of the things you're dealing with? What are some things you're struggling with? What are some of the things that you're working towards for 2024? What are the things that if you got answers to would make your future move in a faster pace, that would make you moving towards your goals quicker? Now, here's what happens every single time. I've seen this a million times. If we were in person and I asked the entire group anything, the first thing you're going to do is your arms are going to lock to your body. And if I say show of hands, your arms are so locked to your body, you can't even lift it. So I want you to shake your arms out now. So when I ask you, hey, what do you want to talk about? What do you want to learn in? What do you want to struggle? What are you struggling about? What are you trying to overcome? We're going to dive into that topic. Is that fair? So a little bit about me. I'm on the East Coast. I'm over here in Maryland. We service the entire state of Maryland. We've been the #1 Keller Williams team here for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years. It has not been an easy feat because there's a lot of great agents in Maryland, but we work really hard and stay really consistent. Our market, I don't know where you guys are right now, our market is down 26%. Our team is only down 9%. So we're beating the market. We're moving in the right direction. Of my agents, I have 17 of them. In fact, we just hired 3 more, so we have 20, but they don't really count because they just started. 17 agents, 11 of them have made more money in 2023 than they did last year in 2022, which was an amazing.
Yeah. Nick, I accidentally muted you. My bad. Apologize. You're still muted. There you
go. Don't you mute me anymore. All right. 11 of our 17 agents have made more money this year than they did last year, and last year was their best year ever. So those are some of the kind of stats that I turn to in a market that's changing, in an industry that's changing, in lawsuits that are coming left and right. And I look for what are the things you can turn to, what are the sure bets that you can do, go back to the basics. Like that's what I built my entire business around. I literally on my desk, so you know this isn't fake, on my desk is MREA, and I probably read the thing, I don't know, 25 times, and I use a lot of what's in it. Is it a dated book? Sure, when they're talking about some things, but the majority of the stuff in there still holds true today. So we can talk about anything you want, whether it's leverage, whether it's lead generation, whether it's culture and building a team, whether it's sales, whatever it is, ask me. And we'll start the conversation and we'll start going. But this is, again, it's not a monologue, this is a dialogue. So if somebody says something and you have a question, pop it in the chat or unmute and just talk. Like, let's have a conversation and make sure this is meaningful for you. Now, as soon as I ask for opinions and say, hey, who wants to talk about something? 98% of you will not say a word. And you are a passenger on someone else's bus. But 1 or 2 of you will say, hey, this is what I want to talk about. And we'll spend the next 45 minutes talking about that topic. And you will walk away from this event and go, Nick Waldner is the greatest speaker I've ever heard. And the other 98% of you will be like, he was kind of entertaining, but it was all right. And you're going to feel that way because you're a passenger on the bus. So don't be a passenger. Actually partake in the conversation. Is that fair? All right. Now, the moment of truth. What are you guys struggling with, or what do you want to talk about and focus this call on? I told you most of you would be scared.
I am not scared. So,
Nice.
question, obviously. So I'm a newer agent within the last 2 years, as is Elton here. We are touching base with how we fight with the interest rates. Obviously, we're not going to win right now. But having that conversation to be able to get it across to them that this isn't like everybody wants to go back to when grandma and grandpa bought a house and it was 12, 13%. Well, they don't care about grandma and grandpa half the time anyway. So they're not going to care about hearing about 12 or 13%. So where do you start with that battle?
Yeah, and I love that. I love the fact that people are so sensitive. If you remember, when rates first hit 7%, people lost their minds. Like, it's so high, this is crazy. And then it got to 8%, and people were like, whoa. And then it came back down to 7%, and people celebrated again. They got all excited, like, oh, finally, the rates are starting to come down. And it's like, wait a minute. 3 months ago, 7 was the enemy, and it was the worst thing you've ever heard, and now it's looking good. So one of the things that I'll tell you is you're never going to be able to convince somebody to do something that you want them to do. They're going to do something that they want to do. So I want you to walk them through this process. So first, you have to believe it. So as I'm telling you this and I'm explaining this, you have to believe it yourself. And, you know, I am a very firm believer that interest rates are high right now, which is dampening the amount of buyers in the market. But when interest rates come down, those buyers are going to come flooding back. I'm very clear on that in my mind. I have bought 2 properties this year at over 7% interest rates. Why? Because number one, they cash flow right now. Number two, when interest rates come down, I'll refi them and they'll cash flow even better. And I'm going to watch appreciation happen on those assets when more buyers come flooding back to the market. Do we all agree that's kind of the sentiment? Is it going to happen in 3 months or 6 months or 9 months or a year or 2 years? I don't know. I don't have that crystal ball, but we know it's going to happen. We know they can't keep interest rates high forever. So, Ariana, let's do a little role play, if you will. Okay. You're the buyer and give me the argument that, you know, hey, rates are a little bit high.
So I was talking to my lender, and the houses that I've been looking at, I can't afford anymore because of the interest rates. I'm looking at something that's like 220, and the homes that I want and that I need are around the 300 mark in our area, and I can't afford it.
Yep. So good news, bad news. What do you want to hear first?
Bad news. I like bad news first.
You can't change their income or make them be able to afford it. So there is going to be clients that you can't help. Like, hey, my requirements are at 300 and I can't afford it. I can't get a loan for that much. But let's go back to a different market. If a buyer showed up to you and rates were at 4% and they said, hey, you know, I need to buy a house at 300,000, and you went and got them pre-qualified, and the lender said, look, they don't qualify for that. They barely can cover 200, and you look in the market and there's nothing for 200. What would you have done with that client a year and a half ago?
That's when you start working on their credit. That's when you start working on their DTI and everything that they have, their mountain that they have to climb. You find somebody that's going to help them climb the mountain.
Yeah. So what you're saying is you take that person and you hand it off to somebody else to work through their problems. And then what do?
Continue to follow up with my client and the lender I sent them to.
Yeah. That client's gone. What do?
Move on to the next one.
Bingo. That's the key. We're in a market right now where we just came out of anybody who wants to buy a house could buy a house. rates were low, income was high. You know, obviously it was hard to find a house and negotiate and multiple offers and all that. But if you wanted to buy a house, you were pretty much approved and you could go buy a house. There's tons of buyers out there. And now we're no longer in a want to buy market. We're in a need to buy market. Every client you have right now that's like, yeah, I guess I could move if something amazing came up, that is now a terrible client. Move them to the side. You're still going to keep them. You're still going to follow up with them, but that's not your main focus. You're going to go out and look for the people who, hey, I just got offered this new promotion and I have to move from Austin to Dallas. Or, hey, you know, my kids just graduated. They're all off to college. My wife and I are tired of this big house. We want to downsize. Or we have this medical, or we just had a baby and we're outgrowing our house. We need something bigger. Or, you know, my grandfather passed away and we now have this house we need to sell. Those are all people that need to buy or sell. Not that want to, because it'd be cool to have a nicer pool, but they have a need. So we are in a needs market right now. You have to go find people who need you. And it's much harder. You call 20 people and you could find one person who wants to buy. But now, because I'm telling you this, you might need to call 30 to find one who needs to buy or sell. And that's going to be really hard for us to grasp. Now, you're only 2 years in, so you don't have a clue of how many people I need to call before I find a client. So if I say 30, you're like, okay, I'll call 30. But the rest of us who've been around for a while are like, wait a minute. I was so used to calling 15. I don't want to call 30. And it's like, it's the same thing with your metabolism. When I was 20, I could eat anything I want. It was never a problem. Well, guess what? It's not like that anymore. And it's not going to change just because you don't want it to be this way. Now, I walk past that plate of chocolate chip cookies and I'm like this. I don't want to look at it. I keep my distance. It's calling me. Come eat me, Nick. Come eat me. No. Keep my distance because I know I'm not in that market anymore. I'm not in that age range anymore. So you have to understand the same thing. Does that make sense? Okay, now I want to stay on this topic to make sure we're understanding it. So now give me the different scenario. You can afford it, but you're just not willing to pay the interest rate.
So I saw this house. It has just about everything I want. It has the pool, has the rooms, everything. It's at 420, but with that price range, I looked up how much it's going to be at the end of it because of the interest rate. And I'm not willing to lose all of that.
Not willing to lose all that. What do you mean by that?
With the interest rate, it's just going into space. I'm paying so much extra for a home that is only going to appraise for 420 and I'm going to end up paying over 500. Doesn't make sense to me.
Yep, I can understand that. And interest rates right now aren't great. So you want to agree with their issue, make sure they feel heard. All right? And now I'm going to go into the solution. So, you know, let me ask you a question, Ariana. At what interest rate would you feel comfortable?
Probably around back down to the 4s, 5s. That's where it looked comfortable and that's where everything was going fast and everybody wanted something.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have lots of buyers just like you that have said to me, Nick, 8%, don't even call me. I don't want to buy a house at 8%. But when rates get back down to 5, call me because I'll be ready to jump back in the market. Is that about how you're feeling?
Pretty much.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me give you a scenario. Right now, things are at 8%. How many buyers do you think are out there looking right now?
A lot, just as many as before.
Do you think if rates are at 8%, not 5%, there's still just as many buyers today as there was when it was at 5%?
Well, I guess people are on the same stance that I am.
Yeah, like you're a perfect example where you'd be a buyer at 5%, but you are not a buyer at 8%. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we know there's less buyers in the market. And what that does to the sellers is they still need to sell their house. So they're now willing to negotiate a little bit more. They're willing to have more conversations. We've even seen some seller help offered. We haven't seen that in about 1.5 years. Now, it doesn't mean every property. We're still seeing some that are getting multiple offers. If it's a really good house, really good neighborhood, really good price. They might still have multiple offers, but we're also seeing homes that we can negotiate on. And then by negotiating on that, maybe we can change that kitchen to something that we wanted, or add that fenced in backyard, or whatever it may be. But here's what I'm telling you from my perspective. We know that right now, there's not a lot of competition in the market. So prices are starting to flatten a little bit. It's not like it's dropping. This isn't a recession or anything like that. But what do you think happens when rates drop to 5% and all the houses are priced exactly where they are right now?
They're going to get stolen. People are just going to flood to it.
Yeah, they're going to get stolen. And how do you steal a house when there's tons of buyers?
Have the best offer.
Yeah, best offer. And what does that really mean?
The highest offer.
Yeah, you got to pay the most. If now one person wants this house and now the rates drop to 5% and 10 people want to buy that house, what will the prices in the general market do?
They go higher.
Yeah, they're going to appreciate. There's just no way around it. And always, prices always appreciate until demand starts to wane. So there's a huge demand to buy houses, but what did interest rates do? It tampered down that demand because nobody wants an 8% interest rate. But as soon as it comes down to 5, all those buyers come back on and prices will start to raise. When prices go up, eventually they're going to get to a level where buyers are going to start pulling back again. Hey, I can no longer afford that. And they're going to start pulling away, and we'll see it normalize. And we know this because it's happened in the real estate market over the last 100 years. And if you go back and look, there's peaks and there's valleys, but in the end, it's always going up over time. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, rest in peace, have always said, and they're guys that I follow, I feel like they're pretty smart in finance. They always say, if inflation is high, or if values are going to go up, you want to own the assets that are going to go up in value. Does that make sense to you? So if you were to buy a house right now at 8% interest rate, and it stayed at 8% for a year or 2 or 3 years, you're going to have to pay that higher mortgage, right? What will you do in 2 years if rates drop to 5%?
Refinance.
Okay. And then what will you have to do to refinance? Do you have to compete with any buyers?
No.
Do you have to up your offer or get more competitive or waive inspections or offer your firstborn?
Nope.
No, you just need to make a phone call and say, hey, give me a lower rate. And bing, 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 you have a lower rate. Now, what happens to the homes in your neighborhood that are for sale?
They're needing to go through all of those steps that I just skipped.
Yeah, those houses that are now for sale in your neighborhood have 10 offers, have 15 offers, or getting 50,000, 100,000, 150,000 over asking. What does that do to the value of your house?
A skyrocket.
So you are in an asset that's appreciating in value, and your payment is dropping because your interest rate is now coming down. Is that not the scenario you want to be in?
That's perfect.
Now, here's what I would tell you. Let's look at the other side of this. So let's say, Nick, for example, it doesn't go from 8% to 5%. It goes from 8% to 10%. What do I do, Nick? Or what do I do now? How will you feel about your 8% rate when the going rate is 10% right now?
I'm not moving.
Yeah, no, you bought it today at 8%. In 2 years, it's now at 10%. How do you feel about your 8% rate?
Great. I can't sell it because I'm not going to find that 8 again.
Yeah, you feel pretty good about 8% only because your alternative is 10%. So let's say you don't buy today and the same thing happens in 2 years, rates are at 10%. What would you do then?
Keep my house. I don't know.
Yeah, you're not buying, right?
Yeah.
If you're not buying at 8%, you're definitely not buying at 10%. So we might have to wait another 4 or 5 years after that to get down to that 5% you wanted. So are you okay staying in your home for the next 7 to 8 years? Now, I know you mentioned you're in a 2-bedroom. You now have 4 kids. You need a place for your mother-in-law to live. Are you okay staying in there for the next 7 or 8 years?
Absolutely not.
Yeah. And that's the problem is we want to buy a house based on investments or how it makes sense. But the truth is we buy a house for one of 5 reasons. It's either there's a birth and we need to increase our house size. There's a death and we need to let go of a property. There's a marriage, there's a divorce, or there's a job change. Those are the reasons people buy and sell real estate. It's not interest rates. So I understand where you're coming from, not wanting to pay 8%, but I just want you to think about your options. You don't have to buy at 8%. Now, I personally have bought 2 homes this year at 7.25% and 7.75%. And it's because I know the market and I know what's going to happen in 2 or 3 years. And I know what I'll be able to do in 2 or 3 years compared to the competition. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I never looked at it that way.
Now, did you see how much this was an economics education? This was not me convincing her to do anything. I was giving her more information so she could make the smart decision for her. You know, she might say, I don't have a mother-in-law that wants to move in and I don't have 4 kids, so I'm good. I'm just going to stay here. If in 2 years I can buy, great. If it takes me 5 years, I'll wait 5 years. That's okay. That just tells me I need to go out and find the people who need to buy or sell because this is somebody who just kind of wants to. Does that make sense? All right, that was awesome. Great start to that. Now, Ariana just said, wow, this is an amazing call. And the rest of you could have said, oh, Nick, I already knew that. Well, you didn't speak up. So now's your opportunity. What do you want to learn about? What do you want to talk about? Where do you want to go with this conversation?
I got one, if you can help me out with something. So yesterday I was doing some door knocking, getting ready for an open house. Met some good people. That was great. I met one gentleman. He was interesting, and I had a pretty long conversation with him. And he kept, it was kind of new for me. He kept bringing up YouTube channels that he follows with different commentary about the state of the real estate market. And basically, it was a real doomsday sort of conversation where he says that, you know, we're all being lied to and the market's going to fall out and basically the foreclosure crisis is going to be here all over again. And I don't feel that way. And I was trying to just basically convey my confidence and basically what you were talking about. Yeah, rates are ridiculous, but as soon as those rates go down, our prices are going to go back up even more than they are right now. I can't find a place in my head right now where it's going to make sense for the prices to just fall out. So I'm trying to convey this information to him, but he just kept coming back at me each time with another channel that he sees or another, you know, another this, another that. And so I just basically, how would you diffuse that, or how would you move those conversations along?
So what did he have compared to what you had?
To him, they were very good, reliable sources. I wish I had written them down.
They were data points.
They were his like sources that he goes to, but they're not, you know, anything mainstream or, you know, and if you come back to him with actual facts and figures or, you know, the marketing data reports I had, recent sales and things like that, what's listed right now and where the prices are, even none of that made any sense to him because the people that he listens to and trusts really paint a real, you know, catastrophic doomsday picture for him.
All right, good or bad? What do you want to hear first?
Let's do bad.
Okay. If you got him to work with you, how do you think working with him would be?
I guess that's you know what?
You already know the answer. He would be a miserable person to spend the next 6 months with.
Yeah.
Do we all agree?
Yeah.
So one of the beauties of this job is we get to say, hey, you're an a-hole. I'm not working with you. Excuse my language. But that's our job. Our job is to be able to say who we want to work with. And when someone is just completely out there in la la land, that's not somebody you want to go after. But let's say he wasn't completely out there. Let's say he had just found some sites and he had heard some things and was worried about it. So again, it's going to go back to an economic conversation. So Amber, do you know the only time when real estate prices took a nosedive?
Well, I mean, I started in 2009. That's when I became a realtor. So
Well, for all of us that have been here for a while, you came right after the crash. It was
Yeah.
like 2007, 2008, wham, everything came slamming down. And what was it that caused that?
the loans, basically, right? The predatory lending and whatnot.
Yeah, the lenders and the banks made up all these rules that anybody could have a mortgage. Whether you could pay, whether you could afford it, whether you could even prove you had the money to pay it monthly, doesn't matter, we'll give you a home. That was a huge debacle, and that created a bubble because, again, we have more buyers in the market now that anybody can get a loan. I mean, I bought a house that year, one of those years, where it was a stated mortgage. And a stated mortgage is, Nick, how much do you make? I don't know, 100,000. You think you make like 150 to qualify? Yeah, okay, 150. Boom. Okay, great. Sign here. I don't need bank statements. I don't need pay stubs. I don't need tax returns. I'm just going to take your word for it. Now, the reality of that is when we look back now, it's like that was insane. The government was trying to incentivize home ownership, and it just was a terrible plan. All of a sudden, we had all these people that couldn't pay their mortgage. So now all these mortgages, like all of a sudden they start, I can't afford it. I need to sell. I can't afford it. I need to sell. And what happens when you have too many houses for sale? How do you get your house to sell?
You have to lower the price. Yeah.
Lower. And then banks realized, man, we're going to get stuck with a lot of property. So we're going to agree to short sales. So now even people that could afford their house are like, wait, I could do a short sale and get out of it.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't matter if I sell it for 250 or 220 or 200 because I'm going to get that amount waived. Yeah, whatever, just sell it. And again, prices started crushing down. Now, what happened to the building industry?
They stopped, right, for a while.
Yeah, they everything froze.
Yeah.
Like, why would you build something when everything else is going down in value? So as you're building it, it's going down in value too. So every builder was just like,
nope,
stop building. And there was tons of smaller and regional builders that had tons of inventory and they got crushed and they had to sell off all their inventory and it put them in bankruptcy. So it wiped out builders. And this is in 2008, 2009. So if you look at the numbers for the next 10 years, from 2009 to 2019, there was about 4 million homes that were never built. Going by the standard of how many are built a year, there's about 4 million in that 10 years that never got built. What do you think happened to the population in America during those 10 years?
Yeah.
It went up 35 million. Okay, we have less houses being built and more people procreating. We're getting that supply and demand again. So we're in a world where there hasn't been enough homes built for the population. So the idea that values are going to come down, there isn't some sort of crash out there. There isn't any reason for that. And if you want a better fact to understand why we're not in that position, it's something like 50% of homes right now have zero mortgage. And 72 or 78% of homes have a mortgage with less than 60% value. That means they have 40 or 50% equity in their house. So now if you go back to that same scenario and doomsday happens and people have to sell, it's worth 400 today and they have to sell it for 380 or 360, but they only owe 220 on it. Can they afford to sell it?
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. There isn't this doomsday, everyone's going down. There isn't the banking crisis now that was then. Back then, it was like 72% of the properties had 3% equity or less. And now it's the complete opposite because the banks wised up. They got harder on getting loans. Everybody had to go through more scrutiny. If you bought a house in the last 5 years, you know they asked for a ton more than they used to. And that's all to shore up the banking so we don't have another real estate crash like back then. So as you're,
basically, yeah, basically you're saying the same things I was saying. You just say it more eloquently than what I could when I was standing right there with, just all the crazy in front of me. However, I couldn't get through to him. So in that case, obviously the best thing would be have a great day.
yeah.
Yeah.
Have a great day. And you might even say something like, what were those YouTube channels again? All
Yeah.
right, thanks again. I'll go ahead and look at those and then
Yeah.
just walk.
And adios. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we're in a market where it's not people who want to buy or sell, it's people who need to buy and sell.
Yeah.
And that is hard for most of us who just came out of the last 5 years of like, woohoo, 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 top sales, top sales, top sales.
Yeah.
All right. Who's got another one? We're rolling along. We're halfway through.
I guess I have another one.
All right.
So the
Wait,
question.
hold on. Before Ariana goes, because she's obviously the smartest person in the room and realize if I'm going to waste an hour of my day, I better make it meaningful. Does anyone else want to make this meaningful for yourself? Okay, Ariana, it's your Ariana show. I like it.
I like it too. So we're doing classes in our brokerage around here about our buyer broker and our agency and all the fun stuff. How are you going to start that conversation with the clients now, with the buyers coming in? If they're already having problems with their closing costs or their down or even their earnest money, how are you going to approach that buyer broker with a client that is possibly a high risk on the return?
So you're saying like a buyer who's only going to put down, who's barely able to scrape together the 3.5%. And now they're going to have to pay a buyer's commission of 2.5 or 3.5, or I'm not picking a number, but whatever that number is for you. That's what you're asking about?
Correct. How do you work with that? And how do you talk to your clients about it? How do you start that conversation?
When do you get your buyer agreement signed?
So my team habitually uses the buyer broker.
Okay.
And we have that conversation every time we talk to the clients about it. We explain it. A lot of people are coming up with in the news right now, all of that fun mumbo jumbo. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to see other points of view and how other people approach it from the get-go.
Okay. So when you talk to somebody and first of all, you are in the minority here of people who do it when you first sit down. 90% of us, my team included, we're guilty of this as well. Get it signed when we're making an offer. It's like, oh yeah, 3 more pages, sign these 2. Like that's the reality of how a lot of us does business or did business. That's going to have to change. But one of the things we don't realize, there are 12 states in the US that require it to be signed the very first time you meet with someone. 12. And when you go to anybody in those states and you say, hey, when do you get your buyer agency signed? They're like, what do you mean? The first meeting, that's always how it is. That's our law. That's what we have to do. The rest of us are just coming upon that and realizing, wow, all right, I really need to do that. I really need to figure that out. So we're going to have to change our plan. But you already do it. So how do you approach for sale by owners? Do you discuss that with them and what happens with the commission?
Like I said, I'm newer. I've never actually had a for sale by owners. So while we do our buyer brokers and all of that good stuff, I always create the jargon for everybody to start talking, and then I just feed off of it. So I would love to know how somebody else approaches that.
Okay. So do you know what your buyer agreement says on a for sale by, or just about the commission in general? Who is required to pay the commission per your buyer agency agreement?
Well, it's the buyer if it's not offered by the seller and it's negotiable, and if yours says 1% on the buyer broker, but the seller has offered a 3-4% whatever, they're not gonna have to. the seller will, sorry.
Yep. That's okay. That's okay. So it basically says that Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you are responsible for my commission when we find the right house for you and we negotiate it to a point where you like it and you say yes. I'm required, you're required to pay my commission. Now, I can also negotiate my commission with the seller and try to convince them to sell it. Now, here's looking into the future. In the future, I'm going to have these stats. Right now, we don't have them yet. But, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, 92% of my transaction, I'm able to get part or all of my commission paid by the seller. In the event that we can't, and we come to an agreement where you still want the house, it will fall on your plate. So I just want to make sure you're aware of that. Every once in a while, there's a for sale by owner that doesn't offer a commission. This was prior to the whole lawsuit. Every once in a while, there's a for sale by owner that won't offer a commission, but we can get such a deal on the house that it would be in your best interest to cover the commission yourself because you're getting a good deal in the house. Does that make sense? And you never have to buy the house if the house price and the commission is too much. That's okay. So if we go and look at a house and we negotiate it and they won't pay a dime of the commission and you're already at your limit, we might need to walk away from that one and go find another one that's going to be a little bit more agreeable to the commission.
What if I can find another agent that's going to be willing to do it for a lesser, or just be able to do it just to have the numbers under? How are you going to tell me that I'm going to walk away from my house if another agent's going to be willing to do it?
Yeah, so you definitely can get lower priced agents. Like I won't argue. There are people that will do it a lot less for me. But let's say you have a wedding coming up this weekend. Where are you going to buy your dress?
Dillard's. That's rings. I don't know. I don't go shopping. But
all
yes.
Right. Well, you're going to a fancy wedding. You need a fancy gown. Where are you getting it?
A fancy store.
Well, you can go to Walmart and get one. Why don't you just go there?
Because it's a wedding and I want to be in fancier clothes.
Yeah. You want the nicest dress that you can afford, right? You want to look your absolute best. Well, let me ask you this. Are you buying your most expensive asset? Do you have anything that's worth more than this $700,000 house that you're trying to buy?
No.
Okay. So I would assume that you want the best representation to negotiate the best deal. And, like on the listing side, we would say we sell our homes at 104.3% of asking, which means essentially you're getting an extra 4.3% in sales price, which more than covers our commission. So that shows you we're worth it. You're going to do the same thing on the buyer side. On the buyer side, it's going to be, 93% of the time I get the commission paid for by the seller. In the rare instance that I don't, my buyers only move forward if the house is a great price and a great deal. But we'll include all that in the conversation. Another option to, like, if you don't like the dress, so let's say that some of the ones I've heard are very like, let's say you were, this is not you, so knock on wood, but you got pulled over for drunk driving and now you have to go to court. Now you can pay an attorney to represent you, or you can go with the free public defender. Now, knowing if you lose your license, you're going to be in a real struggle to sell real estate. Are you paying for the attorney or are you getting the free one?
I'm paying for it.
Yeah, same thing. I'm no different. You're paying for value. If you needed heart surgery, you're not going to the cheapest doctor. You're going to the one who has the best record. And let me show you why I have the best record. And here's all the things I'm going to do for you. And here are the things. So this is where we have to learn our value proposition. This is where we have to say, by working with me, not only am I helping you buy the house, but I have contractors that can come in and reduce the cost of repairing that kitchen or changing out that bathroom or adding that finished basement. I have discounts with ADT, with pods, and you start showing your value. By working with me, you save here, 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 and here. This is so over the course of the last year, I have negotiated my list to sale prices at 96.2%, which means my buyers are paying 3.8% less than the list price. which again, more than covers my commission. Like, we have to get really clear with our numbers, with our value proposition, and then with some sort of story that ties it all together so they understand the value of choosing the right agent and not just any agent. Now, 10% of the buyers out there aren't going to care anything about what you do. 10% of the buyers, Nick, this is the 26th home that I'm flipping in this market, in this area. I know everything about it. I just need somebody to open the door and let me in. I don't need all the other nonsense. I know exactly what I'm willing to pay for it. And I need somebody to write the contract. Will you do it for 1%, or will you do it for whatever? Now that's going to be a decision that we make, like, yeah, all right, I'll go ahead and do it. Or no, I'm going to spend my time looking for other clients that need my services, that need my skills, and are willing to pay for it. So that's what it's going to be. But what's going to happen is, we don't know what's going to change, but we absolutely know things are going to change. So imagine if you're the government and we just came out with this new, there is no buyer agent commission. And we also have VA loans where we're thanking somebody for being of service to our country. And we're saying, you don't have to pay for anything. You can buy it 0% down. In fact, you're not even allowed to pay for a termite inspection. Like, we want to thank you for what you did. And now we're saying, well, wait, we want to thank you, and you're not allowed to pay anybody. And the only way for you to get a buyer's agent is to pay for one. So all VA buyers, you just need to represent yourself. We can't, it's not going to happen. There's going to have to be changes. There's going to be like there's going to be Congress that comes out and goes, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. That means everybody who served their country is now at a disadvantage to buy a home compared to anybody else. We can't do that. So got to make a change. And we also have lenders that only get paid when they lend money. So if all of a sudden nobody can afford a house anymore to pay their own real estate commission, lenders are going to start coming out and saying, hey, it used to be 3% is the most seller concessions we can receive. Now we're going to up that to 6%, and it can be used to cover any portion of the buyer's costs. So then all of a sudden it's like, hey, I know you wanted $500 for your house. We'll offer you $530, and we need 6% back in closing help. Seller's like, yeah, all right, I'll do that. So again, we're going to start to watch asset prices go up, because that commission is going to start getting thrown in there somehow. Now, any of this could be true, or any of this could not be true. But if we do one thing and we practice our buyer value proposition, and when I say practice, we write it down, we put it down in a form that, or in a book that we can hand our buyer. We put together a VIP buyer process that here's things we do, and here's suggestions we have, and here's contractors we use, and we show them they can save money when they do this, this, this. And if they use our title and our lender, they can save another $500 from that. And we start putting together programs to show our value, and nothing changes in the real estate world. That means we'll just be better buyer's agents with more understanding of what we do for our clients. Okay, that's good. If things change dramatically and we do now have to negotiate for our commissions, how do you think you'll do negotiating with everything laid out, very clear? You practice this 1,000 times compared to every other agent who's like, yeah, I need to get paid. Can you pay me? Like, those people are short-lived for the business. So 1.9 million real estate agents will drop to 1 million real quick when people are like, whoa, I have to go convince somebody. And remember, on the listing side, it's always been that way. You don't go into a listing and say, hey, if you let me sell your house, I can sell it, and great news, the buyer pays my whole commission. So will you work with me? That's what we do on the buy side. But on the selling side, we're like, hey, I'm going to sell your $600,000 house, and I'm $40,000 in commission, or $30,000 in commission, or whatever it is. And you have to show your value of why somebody in their right mind would pay you $30,000 or $40,000. And it's all a value proposition. You've spent the time putting everything down and showing them exactly why they should work with you. Nothing changes on the buy side. We're going to have to put all that together on the buy side as well. And if nothing changes, great, you're better buyer agents. If everything changes, you're prepared for it while everybody else is struggling. So here's what I would do as a region. I would set up some time to go, hey, let's get together, whether it's 5 or 6 or 10 agents, and let's put a list together of all the things that we do in order to help our buyers. And the reason I say 8 or 10 people is because 8 or 10 people will come up with a broader list than any one of us could do alone. So use the collective genius of the table. And then that table comes up with their whole list, and then another group, their whole list, and another group, their whole list. And then we start comparing the list, and guess what happens? We get more and more and more things. Not to mention that you go, wait, Amber, you do that? Oh man, that's really smart. I should start doing that for my clients. Again, you're becoming a better agent because you're starting to realize the things that you could do. So this is an opportunity for us to come together and work these things out together. Work on what is our buyer value proposition? What are we offering? What specials can we give? What discounts can we give? Like, how are we setting ourselves apart from everybody else? This is your opportunity to stand out from all the other agents that aren't on this call, aren't having this conversation, and have no idea what's coming, and they're going to be blind to it, which means 50% of them are going to be out of the market very quickly, and 50% are going to struggle until they take the time to figure it out. You want to be ahead of that curve. You want to be prepared. And all of a sudden, I think there's several MLSs right now that have already come out and said, we're removing the buyer comp from the MLS. There's no more, you can put 0, you can put $1. Nope, none of that. There's not even a space for it. When there's not a space for it, you have to have that buyer agent conversation early with your buyer and let them know, based on this document, I can negotiate for my commission from the seller. However, any portion lower than whatever your number is will have to be covered by you as the buyer. But let me rest assured 93% of the time I'm able to blah, 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 blah. That makes sense? All right. Anybody take something besides Amber and Ariana, my 2 favorites, by the way? Did anybody else, anything I said that you want to say, I don't know if that's true, or throw another rebuttal, or what's another reason why maybe that will or won't work? Like, what are your thoughts as you hear me say all this? Talkative group.
Hi, Nick. This is Cindy.
Hi, Cindy.
I just want to say that was a great conversation around the buyer broker. I think that's we have to take it very seriously, and we have to be able to have the right conversation and scripts around that to be able to. We all know our value, but we're not always great at giving our value. So I like the idea of the book, and and not being afraid to tell them about 150 steps to get a transaction done and those kind of things.
Yeah, if I sit down with my client and say, let me walk you through our buyer experience, and here's what you can expect, and here's what we offer, and blah, 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 and I go through this whole thing, this is from Place. If I go through that whole thing, like, I got that to study it, to see what they do. And I want to know what this person does and what that person does, and what are the top teams doing, and how can I use it? There's not a single piece of my success that came from my little pea brain. Everything I do, everything I've built, everything I've grown is because somebody was doing it and I was like, ooh, that's smart. Let me implement it. Most people think knowledge is power. That's nonsense. Knowledge plus implementation is power. You guys all just learned how important it is to know your buyer value proposition. Just because you know that, will that change anything? No. You have to implement and work on it and put it together and build it out so that when the opportunity approaches where a buyer says, so tell me about why I have to pay your commission, you're not left sitting there going, you've already implemented and started all the process and created all the things that you need to be able to be like, great question. And in fact, I'm glad you asked, because a lot of buyers don't ask, and not all agents are created equal. Let me show you some of the stuff that I do that most of my competitors don't. And now they're like, all right, pay the guy, whatever. So just know that's coming, and you have to take action on the knowledge you're receiving. Knowledge is not power. Implementation is power. And that's the only reason I'm successful, is because when I hear something, I'm like, I like it, let's do it. And we put it in practice. And I screw it up and I get it wrong. And then I call the person back and be like, your system doesn't work. And they're like, well, tell me how you did it. And I explain it. And they're like, no, not like that, like this. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then I go back and change it and change it and change it and change it until it works. Does that make sense?
Yes,
right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you got it. I'm just seeing if there's any comments that we need to talk about. What else? What else should we talk about? Oh, Sagar, you said we still have low inventory with high prices and high interest rates. Is it a buyer's market or seller's market? It really depends on the area. And I would actually say it not only depends on the area, it depends on the price point. I have seen some areas where their high-end prices haven't been changed at all. I've seen other high-end areas that are really getting hit. I've seen first-time buyer price ranges still skyrocketing and still having multiple offers left and right. And I've seen some that are starting to slow. So in order to know that, you have to know your market. So for example, when I started this conversation and I said, I know my market is down 26%. What I didn't say is I know every single county. I know counties that are down 32% and counties that are down 24%. So county by county, I know how it's doing. And I know that because when I sit down with a buyer or seller, I need to be directly talking about their market, their county, their zip code. I can't talk about Maryland as a whole. Just like if you told me the average temperature in America today was 68 degrees, well, that means nothing if I'm in Key West or if I'm in Alaska. Like, the average temperature means nothing. But the average temperature in the city that I'm in, okay, yeah, tell me that, because that helps me decide what I'm going to wear today, or jacket or no jacket and all that stuff. Does that make sense? So when you look at that, like, think through that, what that means, and make sure they understand where the market is. And I can also tell you something else I was thinking about when we talk about the lawsuit and all this. Why do you think sellers right now are complaining? Why are we spending all this money on real estate agents? Why are we paying all these commissions? Because it's really easy to sell a house. If this was a tough market where there was tons of houses sitting and there was no buyers, do you think anyone would complain that they have to pay somebody to get their house sold? Or would they be willing to do it because, hey, my neighbor's not selling, I'll pay you and you get it sold? Like, now you're obviously creating value. So that's why they pay you. So just know that this market is a big reason that we're even in all these lawsuits and all this stuff. Because right now, sellers are like, what did they do? They put a sign in the yard and 19 people showed up? I could have done that. Why am I paying them so much money? Why am I paying a buyer's agent when I had 19 people trying to buy my house? I don't need to pay their agent too. We're in the market that made it realistic. But when we think about what a buyer agent commission is, this is the way I think about it. And right or wrong, this is the way I look at it. It is not a buyer agent commission. It's an incentive. It is a way to attract all of you that have a buyer for my area in my price range to get you to bring your, it's an enticement. I want you to bring your buyer to see my house. If I said, all right, let's say it's 3% for the buyer agent commission, just throwing numbers out there. So it's $15,000 on a $500,000 house. If I said to any of you, I'll give you $15,000, market this home and find me a buyer. What would you do? Google ads, social media ads, put up a billboard, do those yard signs all over pointing to the house. Like, what would you do? How would you spend that money? I guarantee the most efficient way is just to take an ad out that says, if anybody brings me a buyer for this house, I'll give you $15,000. You're going to get, look at that, my hand raised. You're going to get a lot more people showing up because they're enticed. That's how it works. So that's what we're doing. We're enticing agents to bring their buyers. And when there's a shortage of buyers, we'll go out of our way to entice people. Like, think about new construction. There's a time when new construction's like, we'll pay you 3%, make it 4%. Oh, it's a bonus this year. We're going to give you 5% for your third house. And we're like, wow, this is great. And we're bringing all our buyers. And then what happened when it became a buyer's market? You sell $1 million house from us, we'll give you $50 and a pat on the back. Now get out of here. Like, that's really what happened in our market, where we have new construction that are like, we don't need you, we're not paying you. And as soon as the market turns, oh, agents, our best friends, come back and hug me. That's just how it goes. That's how the market goes. I've been doing this for 20 years, so I've seen when builders love us and when builders could care less about us. It's all in whether it's a buyer or seller market.
I have a question regarding buyer and seller market. What information are we using now to determine that, other than days on market? Are we considering not just the list to sell ratio, but what about concessions? How are we averaging those in there? Because I don't know that that's all disclosed on everyone's MLSs, if that's public information or not, or not public, but to the other agents.
Yeah, for our MLS it is, and we're part of Bright. I'm not sure what MLS you guys are on, but for us, you have to put the sales price and the concession price. So again, we're going to get really specific with this. So if I come to Lindsay's house to help her sell, and I pull my comps of homes that sold in a 2 or 3 mile radius, similar size, similar condition, I'm going to be going through them. I'm going to be like, all right, Lindsay's very rich, so she's in a $3 million house. Lindsay, your neighbor sold for 2.8 million and they paid 20,000 in seller concessions. Now this other house sold for 3.1 million and they paid 70,000 in concessions. And I'm going to go through that and show my seller exactly what the market's doing. However, if I go to my seller and I'm like, hey, this one sold for 2.8, not a single concession. This one sold for 3.1, not a single concession. This one sold for blah, 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 not a single concession. I don't think you need to offer a concession. I think we can work on finding a buyer. And that's how we're going to approach it. We're going to look at what's going on in the market. In a buyer's market, what sellers used to do, or what we used to do with sellers, and we'd pull all the comps of the active competition. Now, good luck finding active competition. But back then, there was tons of houses. So we'd pull up all the active competition. And I would say, all right, this neighbor's offering 2.5%. This one's 2.5%. This one's 2.75, and this one's 3. What would you like to do to incentivize a buyer's agent to choose your house over those? And they would pick a price. Or I'd say, hey, every one of your neighbors, all your competition is offering 2.5. I think we're fine just offering 2.5. Or all your neighbors are offering 3.5. I think we need to offer 3.5 in order to be competitive. It's not my opinion. I'm just showing you if you have a house that offers this and a house that offers less, which one is the buyer agent or buyer going to move towards?
Yeah.
And now nothing changes with that. Like, now it's actually a little bit more that way. Like, it used to be, well, listen, Nick, we're agents and ethically we have to show them every home regardless of commission. 100% agree with that. But now that the buyer has to pay it, now you say, hey, this house is 600,000. They're not paying, you'll be paying my buyer agent commission. This one's 600,000 and they're offering to pay my entire 3%. Oh, now which one does the buyer want to see? Gosh, I hope we like this one because it's $18,000 less. That's what's going to happen. And when the market changes, we're going to have to find a way to incentivize the buyer to bring their agent to us rather than go to the house next door.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. Good question. 501, that's it, Southwest. That was all we got. I need, normally I would say 4 takeaways from 4 different people, but you guys are mute and no one knows how to speak. So I'm going to ask for 2 people to give me 1 takeaway each that they got. They just spent an hour with us. What did you learn? What did you get out of this? What are you going to do with it?
I like the analogy that you made about if you need a representation, legal representation, who would you choose?
Yeah.
Is the lawyer expert or would you use the public defendant?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And, you know, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if you are going out to buy a new couch, I don't really think you need me. But if you're going out to spend $700,000, I got to tell you, that's one of the highest investments I've ever made. I would want somebody who knows what they're doing and can walk me through the entire transaction. And here are all the things that I do for my buyers. Love it. Love it. Thank you, Mimi. All right, one more. Brandon?
I'll go, Nick.
Okay.
I loved the idea of getting with my team and really putting pen to paper about our value proposition in representing buyers. And I think when we just like make it clear and concise, and again, come prepared for when that question comes, we'll just be ahead of the competition. So thank you for that.
Yeah, we've all had a salesperson. If I say who's a great salesperson, I guarantee your mind goes to somebody who knew their craft, who knew everything, had all the answers, knew exactly what to say. They were very smooth because they are very practiced and polished. If we're not showing up practiced and polished, we're not great salespeople. And that's hard for people to hear, but that's the truth.
True.
You have to spend a lot of time preparing to make it look easy. When people make something look easy, it doesn't mean because it was easy for them. It means they put on so much work to get there that they've created that. All right, if anyone has Jason Abrams' cell, maybe I'll put it in the comments. I need everybody to send a text message to Jason and be like, wow, Nick was so much better than anything you've ever done for us. Is that fair? 480-299-0805. Send him a message. 480-299. Send him a message and tell him he's okay, but I was awesome. Cool? All right, guys. Have a great day.
Thank you, everybody.